Welcome to Design Speaks, the podcast that helps you discover uncommon inspiration, take control of your creativity, and create work that gets noticed. I'm your host, Brandy C. Joining me is my co-host, Julie Hyder. This week, we're talking to Andy J. Pizza about so many things that we can't even put it into a description. Stay tuned for that coming up later in the show. Hi, Julie.
Hey, Brandy.
I'm a little bit excited about today. I know that you had a chance to listen to the conversation, but it has been such a really cool privilege for me on this podcast to be able to interview and have real life conversations with some of my creative heroes.
Yeah.
So did you know about Andy J. Pizza before I mentioned him to you?
I didn't. I will admit I'm a little out of touch with the design world since I don't do as much design work anymore.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, he's not technically a designer. He is a illustrator. But he's the host of, I think it's the #1 creative podcast on any platform. It's called Creative Pep Talk. Yeah, and he's been doing it for about 6 years. And I think I've probably been listening to him for most of that time, at least 5 years that I can look back. And he does one every week. And his energy and his weirdness and the way that he just conducts himself on the podcast has always been a huge draw for me. So I know that you got to listen in to it, and I hope that it wasn't too bipolar because I was a little bit all over the place because I was so excited. But what did you think overall of the conversation?
Yeah, I thought it was a great conversation, and I could tell you're having such a great time. You got to talk about so many of your favorite things. Yeah, and you two have a lot in common.
Yeah, I think that was probably the most fun and the most surprising for me. So just as a sidebar, part of I've been trying to get a hold of him to be on the podcast for probably 2 years. And I just happened to hear that he mentioned that he's next door neighbors to someone named Colin who has a band called Vespertine.
Oh my gosh.
that they're next door neighbors on one of his podcasts. And I was like, what in the world? So I texted Colin, who's my friend. He's the one that does the song for this podcast.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, is Andy Miller your next door neighbor? And he was like, yeah, dude, we're really good friends. And I was like, okay. So I've been trying to get a hold of him to be on my podcast for a long time. Can you put a bug in his ear? And so not too long after that, I finally got a response from Andy, and he was like, yeah, sorry it took me so long. I don't really check my Instagram messages that much. And I was like, no problem. And so we already had this baseline of a common friend. And so besides that, having all these other sort of elements in common, how we approach work, how we really think about literary themes and inspiration and stuff like that was just I felt like I've known him forever. So
yeah,
I hope you guys enjoy the episode, and we will do a little recap after it's done. So I don't know where to start. I'm not going to have you do your elevator pitch because I feel like people know who you are. And if they don't, I'm sure that they will get to know you here over the course of this conversation.
Sure.
So,
okay. That's fine with me.
So I have a number of things I want to talk to you about. Everything from story to inspiration to process and music, all things that this podcast has revolved around since I started. Just so you get to know me a little bit, I've been in the graphic design space since 1999, 2000-ish.
Yeah.
So 2001 is about where I really started doing it as a profession. And I have, over the course of these years, come to really realize that the way that people approach graphic design isn't something that I was super fond of. And so I was trying to think of how I could approach it and teach it differently, and really have come to terms with this idea that your own voice comes from where you find inspiration in here. And then infusing that through a process, so that you still have strategy, but you also have your own voice. So I guess I'd like to start with what are your thoughts on, I know you are a huge proponent of finding your creative voice.
That is true.
That is a big thing for you. But where for you does that creative voice meet with the strategy involved with being a professional creative? Because I feel like it's either one end of the spectrum or the other. Often when I meet with designers, it's like, oh, well, it's all strategy and it's all this, and I lose my voice because I have to take on the voice of the client. Or it's all the way over here, like, well, I do what I want, and it doesn't matter if they like it, and if they don't, well, screw them. And it's like, okay, but there's where do you land on that?
Middle ground. There's a Venn diagram there.
Yeah.
For real quick before I answer that, what was it about the way that you saw people approaching design that you didn't jive with?
Well, one was that I was taught that I had to lose myself for the sake of the client, which I did for about 10 years, like pretty solidly. The other thing was that was more on the client side and the employer side, and on the fellow designer side, it has been frustrating for me to see how little strategy is valued in the design space. Those two things primarily have really driven me to where I am. And probably the other major thing for me is so many designers just all sitting on Dribbble and Instagram and Pinterest and looking at everybody else's stuff and then making their version of everybody else's stuff. And I'm like, there's a better way. We are all so uniquely who we are. Why are we not embracing this somehow?
Yeah, I feel it's really interesting. I think about this exact push and pull all the time. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you're saying is on the client side, there's the emphasis on strategy, on problem solving, on like, let's get to the result. And then on the creative side or the designer side, there's a real resistance to strategy or results, or, to me, I think of it like, because you can think about it, clients or audience, whatever you want.
Right.
There's this huge pushback from the creative side about, I don't listen to my audience. Like, I don't need their feedback. Like, I've got and this is for me, from me, about me, this essence thing. And I think, the
artist ego.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because, I'm a big believer that any good lie is based on a truth. That's that's an idea that I definitely subscribe to. And I think the truth is both of those things are real. That both of them are, and that's the weird thing is, I'm always talking about non-dual thinking, and that's a big thing in my mind all the time. So I just wanted to kind of highlight this thing you're talking about, because I think it's, especially for creative professionals, this is maybe the most significant hurdle to getting your best work, in my opinion, is that I think that there's a false dichotomy between strategy or solving a problem or delivering something that works for your end user, be it a client or an audience.
Right.
So there's that side. And then the other side is being true to yourself, making stuff that resonates from you, stuff that, comes from your soul or whatever. And I think that this is we think that we do this about everything. This is the idea of dual thinking. We think everything, there's two sides. That doesn't exist. It's not in the world. The universe doesn't have
live in two places at once.
No, it's not. And it's not only that, there's no, the universe and everything isn't binary like that. Nothing is. Nothing's binary in this universe. It is a complex spectrum of things. And so anytime you get caught in a place where you're like, should I have strategy or should I be exploring myself? You say, yes. Boom. That's great.
Yes to all of it.
Yes to all of it. Because, in my favorite, I'm a huge student of stand-up comedy. Yeah, I'm a fan of it, but I honestly think they are the current, they're on the edge of the creative mastery in a way that almost no one else, I think, in our culture, in our time is. And I think a big part of it is, And so, well, a big part of it, I think, is that they have a clear target. So they know they're going for laughs. If I say to an illustrator, what are you going for? Like 99.999% of illustrators are like, I don't know. What is a good illustration? Like, yes. How do you hit that target? It's impossible.
Right.
But
how can you hit a target if you don't know what it is?
Exactly. So yeah, what is good illustration? If you don't have any definition of that, it's going to be hard to be a good illustrator. Mm-hmm. But so comics have this. So they have this rigorous process on how they get to great creative work. And part of it is, it's not be true to yourself or be, pander to the audience. It's a narrative. It's not yes or no. It's always start with what's true to you. Start there. And then from there, go out and test your skill. Did it work? Whatever's funny about it to you, were you able to transfer that to your audience? Mm-hmm. And if you didn't, you have to go back to the drawing board. And so it's not either or. And I think this whole thing of like, well, screw them, they didn't get it. That's just a way of hiding. You're afraid of being judged. You're afraid of being evaluated on whether it works. And I get it. I'm afraid all the time. This is a very scary thing to do. Put yourself out there and try to get a result. But yeah, I just wanted to speak to that because I think this is the myth that I think goes throughout. And I think everybody feels like they have to take a side on which one's the right one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I totally agree. And it's been a process for me to learn how to, I've recently shifted into being more of a creative coach and really marketing myself as that and design strategist as opposed to quote unquote, just a graphic designer. Yeah. Because, and it's funny how people, even just like the average layperson's reaction to you changes when you say, I'm a design strategist and creative coach. Or if I say I'm a graphic designer, it's all of a sudden like it elevates what we do, even though I know that I'm still working the same. I've always worked from a place of strategy. My journey has been really overcoming what I've been taught to lose my voice and really grabbing onto that again and figuring out that like my weird is what makes me awesome. Yeah. And I've always known that, but I've never really until the second decade of my practice really owned that. Yeah. In my own work as opposed to just as a human being. Like I'll be the person, wearing a blue wig just for the heck of it. But in my work, it was very like buttoned up and it was like, okay, but where am I here? So speaking of like the journey, I always tell people I probably would have been an English major if I hadn't gone into design. And so the hero's journey I know is something that you are a huge fan of and I am as well. And so that's another reason I'm super giddy about this conversation because this is like a super common ground we have. And I incorporate story and literary methods into how I design. That's awesome. I teach something that uses the word map as a literal map to the strategy that you can use in your design process. That's cool. And using words and not even touching the computer until you've used words to a certain level. And so I don't know that I've listened to tons of your episodes, but I don't know that I've actually ever heard you talk about like what does the hero's journey, what part does that play in your actual literal creative process or design process, your illustrative process, like from the time that you sit down to work or prepare to work, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I have so much to say on that.
The floor is yours.
Real quick, I was gonna just say one thing I wanted to just note because we skimmed over this at the start, and it's just an interesting thing. You were saying, and I'm sorry. I'm like,
no,
why
don't
am
be
I
sorry.
pushing back on?
I love this. This is great.
This is the feeling of I like wrestling with ideas. And so there's this little thread that we didn't pull that I just want to just quickly reverse.
I honestly love this because it always feels a little awkward for me when I interview people. And it's like, okay, they answered that question. Next
I know
question.
that's
okay.
This
They
is
answered
what
that
I
question.
wish people would do. I wish it was more like that, more organic like that, and they
Yes.
would just bring your full self, bring your
Yeah.
interests and
So
passions,
please
and
do it, because
I'm
I
not going to
prefer
derail
that.
it all the way, because I definitely want to get back to the hero's journey. But one thing that you said was, early on in your practice, you felt like you had to design was about losing yourself in the client, like basically not having your fingerprints on the result or whatever. And again, another false dichotomy of there's people on both sides of the aisle on this thing. People that are like, design is not about you. It's not about your style. It's not about your voice. It's about the client and what they want. And style is, there's people, I can't remember. There's like big time graphic design, the
Names.
godfathers of it. Yeah. that would, just crap on
The big
style.
shadow over all of us.
Yeah. And I think, again, this is I think the most important thing, and the thing I wanted to highlight, and the reason I brought it back to this was, I think it's less about which one is right, and I think it's more about starting with your particular sensibility, which is another way of saying your particular taste. It's the idea that and that's where I think this dichotomy comes from, or this binary comes from. There's just, these are two different sensibilities. And the thing is, the most important thing, I think early on in our career, we almost always gravitate towards what we're not and what we feel like we should be. We're Velcro to things that we're sensitive about. Like the things that we know we're not. We're like, oh man, that got me. Like I want to put my self-expression in the work, and that's not right. Like, so we cling to that stuff, and those kind of critiques, we just like gravitate. It's like a tractor beam, and so a lot of people, they spend the first leg of their journey trying to be what they're not, right? Because those are the things that we dwell on, and the truth is, that's really to your creative detriment, because in my opinion, the only thing that you have as a creator is your sensibility. It is
Agreed.
It is this metal detector in you. It's before you ever get to your skill. It's what can you sense? And so for some creators, some designers, the thing that really does it for them, it is beyond style. It's some other metric. It's some other thing that's lighting up that taste, right? And so for them, that's the metal detector they have. So they can go in that, they can explore that, and they have that internal thing that says, ooh, this is good, that's bad, that's what's going to lead their intuition in making decisions. But for those of us who, like for me, since day one, it's always been style and an artist with a very distinct sensibility, all the way back to when I was, obsessed with Jim Henson and the Muppets and Fraggle Rock and all that stuff. He has such a clear sensibility, and and that's what my metal detector is calibrated for. So when I try to go into a place where style agnostic, I can't create from that place, because if you don't have that inner metal detector calibrated, you don't know what's good. You can't make choices. And so everything has to come from that place. So I would always say, it doesn't matter if you want to be style heavy or not. Just make sure that it's your taste that you're working from. Does that make sense?
No, totally. And I call it uncommon inspiration, because what you and I could be sitting in the exact same space and working on the exact same project for the exact same client with the exact same box to work within. But because you and I are uniquely, uncommonly inspired by something completely different in that space, we're going to approach that work from a completely different point of view. And so, I 100% agree with that.
And
I
it
think it's
starts
so
with your
important.
reception. It starts with because I would go sit in a car and we would be cruising in high school with my buddy Kyle, and we'd listen to a song. Both of us would be like, whoa, this song's amazing. And then he'd be like, oh man, it's the bass, man. And I'm like, I didn't even hear the bass, because I didn't have any, I don't have that sensitivity. And I think that's where you've got to come from, and quit worrying about which one's the right choice, and just play it.
And educating your own intuition, educating your intuition, because I think there's a lot of designers that are like, well, I'm just doing it just because it feels right. And I'm like, okay, but does it feel right because you just decided, or does it feel right because you've educated yourself on principles and theories and approaches to this work? And so you're educated, so you're making choices based on things that are actually real, or just based on like your feelings, which are so, up and down and all over the place.
I agree with that. I think it can work the other way, where you study your, I was interviewing this podcaster and public radio host, and she was saying, as she's creating, when she's looking for stories, when she's asking questions, when she's editing in the editing booth, she's listening to her body. She's listening to, when does the internal buzzer go off? Like, I need to move that, or ooh, that, if I switch all that stuff. But the thing is I think, again, back to comedy, I feel like it's just cleaner to use that for me. I think you have kind of 3 stages. You have people that are all in their feelings. They can't explain it. And therefore they don't command it. It's a way more out of their control. Then you have the second stage people are all in the mechanics of it. And at some point they forget to listen to their body. And then there's the people that moved through both listening to their body, knowing the mechanics, forgetting the mechanics, and then just doing it from there. But if you said, why is that
memory.
Funny? Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's good. That's good stuff. Okay. Hero's journey.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Oh gosh!
P.S. My son just has fallen in love with the Muppets over quarantine. Like,
man, what's he watching?
All the movies.
Oh,
all the movies.
Yeah, it's important to me. I'm crazy about it. And did you watch Fraggles growing up at all?
Oh my gosh, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Yes.
Fraggles is the pinnacle of creativity.
Are we like the same age? Pretty close.
I'm 34.
Okay, so I'm older.
Yeah. I think actually I think because I had an older sibling that I got introduced to stuff earlier. And so I'm a little bit, I feel like my taste and is a little bit older than me.
A little elevated?
Yeah, because I always think about, not elevated, no, but just like older, because a lot of my favorite things were like early or 80s, but I wasn't even alive then. And I think it's just it's gotta be a brother thing. Older brother.
Yes.
Okay. Hero's journey.
Sorry, I was just sidetracked now, seeing your little guys in your background. I
got a lot of puppets and stuff.
Yes.
I got Fraggles up there, and
I love the Fraggles.
All my favorite things, and then
love,
me
love.
as a puppet. Which my audience.
The universe aligned on that one.
Look at it. It's ridiculous. Look at it. That's just me. It's kind of distracting, I think.
I honestly keep looking at it, but it's great. I love it.
It's a little bit freaky. Yeah. So
let's talk. Let's talk hero's journey. Let's talk your process.
Okay. Hero's journey. So hero's journey is it's something I'm using all the time. I don't think I think it's kind of like one of those things of how the sausage is made kind of thing. Like it's not that enjoyable to be like, and this is how I did it. You're like, oh, and I think, so whenever I'm doing talks, and often when I'm doing podcasts, I'm usually starting with that as a story structure. And I just, I'm just getting into writing kids' books, but I've tried to write them for a long time, but I just finished writing one that I'm like really proud of. Like I just love it. I don't know if anybody else will like it, but for me, I'm happy. All I did was write it and I'm already done. Like I'm like, I love it. It's fantastic.
Any sneak peeks?
It's I'll tell you, it's mysterious. I can tell you.
Ooh, I like it. Okay, I like it.
It's mysterious. I hope it's not too scary. It's not meant to be scary. It's just a little mysterious.
Like Bunnicula.
What's that? What is that?
There's a kid's book called Bunnicula. It's a bunny vampire.
Oh yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I use the hero's journey for that, and that's really interesting to me because I don't think everybody. I have a buddy who writes stories, and he just has an intuition about storytelling that, that's how a story comes out of him. But for me, I've noticed, and this is the same for everything for me, it always starts with a really deep down idea, like a premise or something I'm trying to work out, often it starts with like a feeling, and then I have like words for it. And so this book is kind of like that, where I was like, I know I want to have these kinds of things in it, and then I know, oh, it's about this sentence. This is the sentence it's about. And then I work back to, well, how do we get to that in a satisfying way? And then I just created I used Christopher Vogler's writer's journey version of the hero's journey. And I put all the 12 steps out, and I just start filling it in. And, that's how I do my talks, and that's how I do podcasts. But then on top of that, this is maybe more interesting than me just talking about, boring mechanics. I also use it as a framework for thinking about life and placing myself and grounding myself in narrative. So that's been a huge thing. And I actually have a strong suspicion, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to think about this, but, I've heard that one theory of consciousness is that all we are, the whole idea of I'm Andy, what that is, you can't point to it. It doesn't exist in my brain. All it is neurons telling a story. They're just this is the story of Andy. And I think that the reason the hero's journey is that story, it's just story structure really, is throughout all cultures of all time, isn't because, they found a clever thing that works on us. It's just this is a map of what's inside of us. That's how we, Christopher Vogler gives an example of when your car breaks down, you tell the hero's journey. It's I'm the hero. I wanted to go get groceries. That was my desire. I was out there. This is what I want. And then, but the obstacle hit, the call to adventure. My car broke down. And you just do that. That's who we are. We are a story. And so whenever you're starting to get all wigged out about life and untethered, and you're looking at the news and you're looking at all that stuff, and you feel like, what the hell is the point? It's chaos. That's when I'll go to hero's journey and say, well, what part of the hero's journey is chaos? Well, it's this belly of the whale, or it's the ordeal, or it's this, or I'm meeting the mentor. I need a plan, whatever it is. Right. If I can find that, I instantly feel okay. And then you read the little section, be this is what the hero has to do when they're in the belly of the whale. And I'm all right, I'll go do that. Or, and so that's how it plays out in my everyday life. But I also, I pull a lot of it visually for illustration, and then all my stories more or less start there.
Yeah, I don't think that I realized how much this played into the process of how I design and how impactful it can be to use that in a more formal process and kind of let your creative voice weave in and out of that story. So it's not like it comes in here and then here. It's okay, well, depending on who you are throughout this process, your voice and your inspiration and your own internal, library of all the things that you have collected over the course of your life will sort of start popping into that journey here and there. And so I also have this theory that I talk a lot about. Alice in Wonderland is my absolute fave.
I love Alice. My daughter's named Alice. After Alice in Wonderland.
My daughter was almost named Alice. Yeah. We ended up with Jasmine, but
okay, I like that
That
too.
is what it is.
That's good.
So I've over the course of the past 5 years been thinking about this idea that it's not about the rabbit. For Alice, she thinks it's about the rabbit, right? But it's really ultimately it's about her journey and what she finds and who she meets and all the things that she learns along the way. And so I've been trying to let that reflect in my own journey. And remember, I even have, I don't know if you can see this here. There's a little flag over here that says excellence with a rabbit on it. And it's just to remind me that it's not about the rabbit. It's not about that one goal that you think it's about. Yeah. And so even in the course of design and, any creative professional practice, remembering that it's about something much bigger than the one thing that you're working on today.
Absolutely.
So I don't know where I was going with that.
I love that. Can I just say, I'll just say something real quick about it. I think about that a lot too. And I always talk about it through the lens of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is a Switch game. And
that's all my husband and my daughter did when it came out. That's all they did.
It's a masterpiece. I said this before Pete Holmes said this, but he said too, he's like, I think this is the best thing ever made. I don't think it's the best video game. It's just the best. It is. It's amazing. But
I was listening to your podcast and my daughter was like, did he just talk about Breath of the Wild? And I was like, yes.
And it was every episode. And she's like, did he do it again? That's all he talks about. But I felt like that point was driven home for me when I went to go fight the bad guy on a whim, because you can go at any time.
Is this Ganon?
Ganon, yes.
Okay.
For those of you
I know
in the
that
know.
much. I don't play, but I heard enough.
And you can go to Ganon at any time in this game because it's open world, which is unlike other Zeldas in the past.
Right.
But at some point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go just fight him. But I thought, I'm not even close to being ready. It'll just be cool. I'll just go check it out. And then I beat him. And it ruined the game. Like I
kept, rocked your world?
Yeah, well, I kept playing. And I was like, why is this not as fun? I'm like, oh, because I caught the rabbit. Like it's because and so there's this thing of now, like I was just telling you, I just beat the game Witcher last night and I'm almost equally obsessed.
What do I do now?
and I beat it and I'm like, but this time through, I didn't rush it. Every time I got a whiff of like, ooh, this could be the final quest, I was like, I'm going to find other side quests because I am not ready to be done with this. And so I think that there's something about, how do you find the creative work that you just want to spend time doing? And that was when I was just talking about that kid's book, the mysterious one that I'm really happy with, that is a product of that lesson because 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I was like, throwing pitches at my editor. Like, what about that idea? What about this idea? And I know it was coming from a place of, I need a kid's book deal. Please give me a kid's book deal. And this book, what I meant by saying, oh, I'm done with it. I'm not done with it. I'm going to keep, I'm going to try to pitch it and do all that stuff. But my favorite part of the process is over and no one's even read it because I wrote that over a course of 9 months, just simmering it, just savoring like, ooh, what about that idea? What about this? What about, because I know this is why I want to make kids books because I like this. That's why, not so that I can sell a book or get a Caldecott or whatever. I like making it. I like writing it. So yeah.
I love books. If there were two things that I could design for the rest of my life, it would be book covers.
Yeah.
And like album art. Like those two things, I never get tired of doing those.
Yeah, that's
there's just so much there.
Yeah,
right?
Completely agree. Completely. Yeah.
Other sidebar, because that's what we're doing here apparently today, is
hey, I'm here. It's ADHD day.
I have a knack for like you reading into things that people don't see otherwise, or like seeing one thing and going like, that would make an awesome children's book or whatever. So I am also just writing very loosely a kid's book about something that I saw my son playing with, a sharpener from the Golden Gate Bridge and a little sewn dragon that my daughter made for him, and he like sat it inside the Golden Gate Bridge, and I was just like,
that's
there's
a
story here. So I totally get that. And I wouldn't even say that like I'm an author, but it was like there's something here, and I've been slowly playing with it over the course
you've
of about a
heard
year.
me talking about the hero's journey and stories and kids books and writing and all that. I'm not an author. Nobody's let me be an author yet. This is what I like to do.
You're an author when you write, right?
I think that's true. I feel like one, but nobody else agrees yet. But we'll see.
Well,
we'll see.
I mean, writing is whatever. We write things for our podcast every day. So
I do.
There's
yeah.
also that.
That's what I'm doing it. I'm waiting for someone to be like, hey man, you're a writer. I'm like, yeah, I've been writing this podcast for 6 years. Someone take notice. But we'll see.
Yes.
We'll see.
Oh man. So have you ever heard of this word apophenia?
Yeah, but I don't know what it means.
So I feel like this is what you and I do. It's basically the inherent ability that some people have to see something in like the everyday,
Okay.
like to see something unusual in the everyday. And so I wanted to pick your brain a little bit. So when I'm out and I'm traveling, so travel is like the main source of my inspiration outside of literature.
I feel you.
Well, one, that's not happening right now.
I
So
know
I'm having to
it's
figure out
really
something else
bad
out.
news. It's bad news for my soul. Travel
It's
is.
hard. It hurts.
Whenever I hear someone say that, this is why I'm an expressive, communicator. Is I want you to know I know what you mean. Like, yes, travel.
It's like right here.
When you go, you place yourself in another context, and your creativity is just on fire every time. Every time I go, things like I've got two big projects in the works right now. One's about dreams, and the other one's about my Invisible Things characters. Both of those came from pieces I made while traveling. While in the UK, my wife's family's over there, and it's just something that happens, man. Like one, we were in Wales, and the other one I was in Northern England, and anyway, I just like that was my little ode to traveling.
No, no, that's great. You're actually
I threw you
partially
off. I'm
answering
sorry.
You're already partially answering where I was going with this because first of all, my great grandpa's from Wales, so my heart.
Ooh.
I haven't been there yet, but I will. My husband and I just went to Europe for 2 weeks in October, so got that in right before this crazy happened.
You went where?
So at least, we went to Europe.
Okay.
So we went to France and Italy and England. So
that's great.
And Scotland. Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. Can I just want to highlight something here.
Yes. What color is your highlighter?
Pink. I just want your audience to know that I have ADHD. When I'm not excited, I'm really good at reining it in of like, don't interrupt, keep it chill, don't go on a tangent. I'm good at that. But all these questions are my favorite things to talk about, and so I'm being impolite, and I noticed it. I just want them to know that I know. I'm trying not to do it, but there's no stopping it.
No, you know what? We are kindred spirits because more often than not, I'm the one interviewing and then interrupting my guests, and I'm like, dang it, like you're supposed to be the polite one.
Well,
here.
you know what? Tell them this. There's a phrase. It's called burstiness, and it's like what happens in a writer's room of if it's a creative conversation and it's working and there's flow. There should be interrupting. It's called burstiness. It's an actual phenomenon.
I'm going to look this up.
You
so
trolls.
That's what I'm just going to call this episode "Burstiness" with Andy J. Pizza.
I love it. Yeah, I love that.
That's what it'll be. No, so I guess just where I was with that is, because I've always had this, right? Like not only has travel always been a huge thing for me, I've always sort of never felt like I belong where I am. Even though I'm not an Enneagram 7, like I'm not always just wanting to go. Like I'm a hardcore Enneagram 3. I don't know what you know about the Enneagram. I'm a hardcore Enneagram 3.
Yeah.
But there's something about...
Well, that's a very 4-ish thing.
I'm a 3-wing 4.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Everything about me is like, oh man, they say that they can't put you in a box, but I feel like pretty okay being in this box because it pretty well like says a lot about who I am.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I feel you.
So wait, what is your Enneagram?
I'm a 4 with a 3-wing.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. This conversation makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
So I've always had a hard time kind of up until recently explaining to people how this works. Like I want to be able to show people how to have this being awake and aware of your surroundings and really putting yourself in a position to, I think that too many people wait around for inspiration. I'm just going to sit here with my notebook and my pencil or on the computer, and I'm just going to wait for inspiration to like hit me. And when it doesn't, then we get all discouraged, then we have self-doubt. So I'm trying to like show people, you have the power to take control of this. You can take control of your creativity. Like go out and look for inspiration. Don't just go out and like wait for it to like land on you, like the dew in the morning. Like go out and search for it.
Yes.
And I'm finding it isn't as easy as I thought to educate people on how to do that, because it comes so naturally to me. So how, as a 4-wing-3 now, I guess, do you actively like think when you go out, like say you're in England visiting family or whatever, and you leave the house to go get coffee, do you think, I want to find inspiration, or do you just kind of like walk around and you already kind of have things brewing for projects you're working on or things, and then you kind of just see stuff, and how do you capture those things?
Yeah, I want to tell you 2 things about that. So first of all, this isn't the main thing I want to say. This is just a little nugget that I think is cool and interesting and helpful to creative people. At least it is to me. And it's this idea of Alfred Hitchcock said that that style is just self-plagiarism. And it's just this idea of like, the reason Wes Anderson's movies look like Wes Anderson is because he did that in Bottle Rocket. And he's like, you know what? I like how I set up that scene. I'm going to copy it. That's style. That's what it is. And the reason I mention that is because I am always working on stuff in the back of my mind in terms of like, I'm always working on something I've already worked on. And that keeps this little, it's like a little flywheel that just, the engine's always pushing forward. And I think, reading Jim Henson's biography, one of the things that's really interesting about him is, when Muppets, the show came out, I don't know if you know this, but it was like the biggest thing in the world at the time. That show was huge.
Yeah.
And it took him forever to get anybody to make it, and blah, 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 blah. But the interesting thing about that is when you watch that show, everybody assumes like they sat around and they were like, okay, what should the characters be for the show? What about a frog? What about a pig? What about this? What about that? Not true at all. That is not how it happened. Well, how it happened was he had spent, I don't know, a decade making commercials for cereal companies and coffee companies and da-da-da-da, all these characters. And he made specials with, different Muppets or puppets and whatever. And they just cherry picked. Oh, we really like this cereal monster. That's Cookie Monster. We really like this, this frog thing. And it wasn't even a frog at first. It was like an amorphous, thing. And they were like, it's kind of like a frog. Let's do that. And so it's just this like collection that just continues to, this patina over time gets added to what you're doing. So I think that's part of it is I'm always working on something that I was already working on. And so I feel like it means, I don't know, I always have something to noodle on, always have something to look out for.
Right.
So I'm like, I'll read a book and there's a quote there like, it relates to this other thing I was working on. So I'm always collecting for multiple collections of projects. So that's one thing. The second thing is though, this goes back to the whole sensibility metal detector thing, because, one of the ways I would struggle to teach somebody to come up with the kind of content that I come up with, how I would find that inspiration, or, whatever. Like I would struggle to pass that on because they would have to acquire that taste, whereas that's something it's innate for me.
Right.
But I didn't always know that. I didn't always know what my taste was. So you can think of whatever type of work you're doing. You can imagine it like a tongue with taste buds. So some people have a sweet tooth. Some people have a thing for bitter. Some people have some people, when they taste cilantro, it tastes like soap. Like
right.
Every tongue is different.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the keys is just figuring out what kind of taste buds do I have? And this actually was a huge thing for me because, growing up, I was desperate to be a comedian. I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live, and that was my dream and everything. And actually, as I got more stable in my creative career, about 4 or 5 years ago, when I really felt like, you know what, I've done this thing, and this is working fine. What else? What do I want to explore next? I was, I kind of toyed with, do I want to do comedy? Because I always wanted to do that, and over the years, I feel like I've realized, I just don't collect funny things. That's not what I do. That's not my taste. I don't and sometimes what I do is funny. Sometimes a story is funny, but it never is the start of the story. It's never why I collected it. I know, this is my core thing, is I know I'm a collector of like synchronicity, which is to me just meaning. And really the best place to put those things are story. So my buddy Kyle Sheely calls this type of person, there's the stand-up comic and then there's the lay down tragic. That's what I am. Which is, and it's because my taste bud.
I just had a really amazing visual image of you. So.
Well, I actually, before we ever said that, in my talk, I have a section where I had started laying face down on the floor as like a visual like gag thing of like just to make people uncomfortable, like Andy Kaufman or something. And like but anyway, but for me, all of my taste, my receptivity, I have a heightened receptivity to meaning. If something feels like, oh, that's the meaning of life, and I'll cry. Like I watched Hamilton for the first time, the movie.
I've only made it to intermission. I'm almost there.
Oh man. We watched half the first night and second half the next night.
My husband's been working a lot of late hours during quarantine, so we haven't had a secondary date for that second half.
If you've got kids and you also are watching with a spouse, it's hard to get stuff in. I get so much grief about the things I don't watch. But that movie or that play, I was like in tears more or less from the start to the end because it's about the human spirit. There's just, I am receptive. That's what gets me. And I have this, and when you have that, that receptivity, there's a nuance in the palate. You're like, if somebody doesn't like bitter things or it doesn't register on their tongue, they're not going to get the nuance of like, oh, this is why this complex palate really brings it out. That's what's going on. But for me, it's all about like what, the invisible stuff, the meaningful stuff, and that's really useful for storytelling because storytelling is, in my opinion, like reproducing synchronicity in people. It's like the ending should come about in what they say is a surprising but inevitable way to where you're like, oh, of course. And that's what it feels like.
Now it all makes sense.
Yeah. And that's what it feels like when you have a meaningful coincidence in your life. It's the same feeling. And so anyway, my whole point with that huge rant was, don't worry about learning to see like one particular person. Just figure out, what do I see?
Just learn how to see.
And then once you're doing that, once you figure out what kind of metal detector you have, then you can start fine tuning the calibration to be like, and now like for instance, I do know my funniest stories, this happened over time. I'm the joke of them. Always. It's always some dumb thing that I did is the punchline.
It's very familiar to me.
When I do something dumb, my calibration is set to be like, boom, putting that in the podcast. Like I just know. And so that's where the training comes in, is like first do the inner work of what am I sensitive to? What, in life and in art. And then once you start calibrating that, you'll get better and better of seeing the stuff as it's happening. And that was, that did ruin my comedy aspirations, was like, I don't value it that much. I don't think of like, it's an effort for me to be like, and what would be funny about that? Where it's not an effort for me to be like, what's the meaning of all of this?
Yes.
Like that's all I'm doing all the time. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So I have a particular sensibility for seeing color palettes.
Yes.
And seeing color in the world. And the meaning behind color is huge. So like one of my big soapboxes that I get on and that I'll just get
very interested in this.
Fired about real fast is like,
sorry.
Okay, so why are you using like black and red and yellow in this? If I'm talking to designers or art directing, which I did for a while. And it's like, well, it just felt right. And I'm like, okay, but why? Why did it feel right? What does yellow say? What does it say when it's next to black? And what does that say when they are both put next to red. And 9 times out of 10, it's like, I don't know. It's like, okay, but you have to know these things because human psychology and our awareness and how color impacts us on a very deep level is so important to how we interact with the thing that you are making. Yes. And so not only do I love educating on the meaning of color, but when I'm out in the world, like that is my number one, like heightened sensibility. And I have way too many pictures on my camera, on my phone, because when I go anywhere, like I'll even just go in my backyard and all of a sudden I'll see either a texture or a color or something that I'm just like, I love the way this looks. Nature doesn't get things wrong. And I know these meanings together will work for X client or this thing. And so I totally get that. And I love the analogy of the taste buds thing because not everybody sees that. But I also think that it's valuable to share with people, like finding meaning like you do. Like it's important to see meaning, deeper meaning in life because it adds value to your life and your work. But it's also important to understand things like color meaning and be able to have that awareness in the world around you because that's one of the simplest things you can find inspiration in when you're out and about, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And, one thing I think you highlighted that I just want to get my pink highlighter out. There's a lot of highlighting in this
episode.
It.
I like it a lot.
I didn't know that was going to happen.
Color's big deal for me. That's why I asked you. What color is your highlighter?
That's definitely pink. So if I'm going for a highlighter, that's the one I'm picking.
I'm always yellow.
Yellow is it's too on the nose. It's not what an Enneagram 4 would pick. That's the problem. But when one of the things I think I really love is that you said is this idea of asking why. This is a huge, huge, huge deal. Your brain doesn't work randomly, doesn't happen. And it's always interconnected to something about your identity, your DNA, your experiences, your story. It's always, or genetics, there's a reason why. And if you understand the reason, now you're in control of it. Now you can do it on command. Now you can do it again. And now you can explain it. Now you can sell it. Now you there's and so when I was starting out exploring my own sensibility, the thing that happened early on was I remember I'm like collecting all these things. I got stuck in this place where it wasn't working and blah 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 blah. We can go into that if you want. But I was like, I started I didn't know what else to do. So I just collected the things that hit me on the most visceral level. This is before I had any language for sensibility or any of that taste stuff or whatever. And I was like, I need to just collect this stuff. And I thought, but why? I just like it. There's nothing to it. It's just, I like that thing. And it was stuff like, I like in a drawing when there's eyes in a hole in a tree trunk. I don't know. I just like it. It's not anything. But I trusted that there was gold in there so that I kept digging. I said, okay, yeah, but every time there's something hidden, I like it. And I looked back to all my kids' books and I noticed this pattern of like, oh, I love this book because there's someone hiding behind the curtain. And at first I'm like, oh, it's just like I just think that's cool. But eventually I realized like, no, that's a metaphor for how I feel about life. I feel like there is more than meets the eye. That's why I like quantum physics because that proves there's other universes. There's so much stuff going on here. And so, but I never knew any of that. And I didn't, my work was so hollow before it had all of this stuff. And I had that command of it. You know what I'm saying? So I love that you're saying that, like, don't just say, I like color. Like, why? What is it? And it reminds me of, I was just listening to this episode of On Being, that podcast. And I don't remember, I'm not familiar who this person was, but she's a Native American. And she went into botany. And she did that because she wanted to ask the question of why do these two flowers grow next to each other? They're purple and yellow, and why is it so beautiful? And the botanist was like, the botany community was just like, it's botany, right? The study of this stuff. Okay, I had a flash in my mind of,
is that
I just
the right
keep
word?
saying this, and it's completely off like a complete idiot.
Pretty sure it's botany.
I'm pretty sure it is. We can call it whatever you want. Geology, whatever. I don't know. Rocks, right? Anyway.
Plant science.
But she's like, that's the question. That's why she went into that. And in the scientific community initially was just like artists. They were like, there's no reason. You just like it. You just like yellow and purple. And she's like, but she proved that there is it attracts pollinators because they are complementary colors and beautiful to the eye. And so it actually gives them an advantage to grow next to each other. And she only found that treasure because she dug into some internal sensibility of like, something's there, man. Like, and that's the good stuff.
Yeah. I was teaching at my alma mater advanced design concepts to juniors and seniors a while back. And one of my students at the end of the term was like, you need to just give out t-shirts to your students that just says why. Because I'm just always asking why. And I tell my audience all the time, like, you need to be like a toddler. If you don't have kids, what that means is you just keep asking why until you absolutely cannot go any deeper than that. And I actually was talking with an Enneagram expert, Chris Hewerts, a while back, and he was telling me that in regards to like digging deep into who you are as a person, like asking why 7 times when he does this with people, like usually ends up with people in tears because it gets to the core of like who they are. He got to like level 5 with me, and then we were doing something and we couldn't go further, but I was like, oh, thank God, because I'm not a crier and I didn't want to go that far.
I am a crier. I love crying so much. But that I was just going to bring up, I heard that in a different context in a branding workshop when I was at a conference, and they were talking, this is what they do with clients, but they do it. And this is really good for creative people because they were trying to get to what is the human problem your company solves? Okay, your company sells rugs. But why? Why do you sell rugs? And the first answer is because we like rugs. Why do we like rugs? We like rugs because our feet get cold on but you go back to because we need rugs. Like there is and the same goes for, this is something I try to get creative people to think about. Anybody that wants to go into business, you've got to have an offering. You've got to understand, why does anybody care? And it can't just be like, because I like that. That's not going to give you everything you need to command it and communicate what you have, right?
Right.
And that's, so what I've started as, well, you're making this because you wish that there was more stuff like this in the world. This is similar to stuff you like, but hopefully once you get to the good stuff, you're critiquing the stuff you like. You're saying, yeah, and it'd be better if it was this way.
Yes.
And so then you say, well, why? Why do I like that? That's the same way that you're serving your audience. And you can go out there and say, I'm making these characters because to me, they represent that there's more to life than what we can see. And I don't know about you, but if this is it, I don't want to stick around. Like I'm not like if everything on Twitter is all that we have, I need to check out. I can't be there. You know what I mean? So that's totally why I need it. And so you keep asking why do you like it? Why do you like it? Why do you like it? You'll get to, this is why I'm here to serve people, to bring this thing. Gary Shandling calls it giving what you didn't get. You know, how are you serving humanity by being the thing that didn't exist before you were here? Like, here's what I wish I would have had.
Right. Filling those gaps with you.
Yeah. Yes, you doing it. Yeah. And it's hard because you got to flip. That's an interesting thing. I don't think I've ever thought of this. You've got to flip from the victim mindset of, that's where you become, that's almost the coming of age hero's journey thing of sitting around and saying, you know, oh, I never got this. I didn't have a mentor. Nobody mentored me.
Right.
To going and saying, I'm going to go mentor people because I didn't get one.
Yeah. Well, I had to go through this process, and that's how I kind of ended up at the platform of take control of your creativity, because I was very tired of hearing, forgive me, all of you out there who think I'm being harsh, like all the baby cry designers that are like, oh, I just don't feel inspired. I can't do any work. And it's like, you know what? Your client and the work doesn't care if you feel inspired. Like, you can take control of this. You can find your inspiration. You can start the dang work, and you can finish, even if it's not perfect, because perfect isn't doesn't exist, and you can put it out there in the world, and regardless of how it's received, it's done, and you did it, and you can move forward. And so like understanding that and teaching people that why for your own purpose is like the beginning point, but then why in a more practical sense when you're working on things is like, why is this typeface right? Why is this color appropriate? Why am I choosing illustrations over photography? And like all the different things that go into that are going to like take you from being just a good technician designer to being like a great designer that is like whose work is getting noticed because it has depth and meaning.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a hiding behind intuition and a hiding behind, I don't know why, it just is. Or, I feel like early on in your career, there's a temptation to hide behind endorsements and like, how do I get in the room just by, fancy words or whatever. But eventually you just realize like that you're building your career on sand if you don't have actual value. And so now I actually, there's a lot of work, advertising stuff that I did early on in my career with illustration that was so fashion based. It's just, trends and whatever. And actually like mostly run away from that. Like if there's some advertising company or some ad campaign that really wants to use my voice and it's a good fit, I'm still here. I'll do it, as long as it,
I'll take your money.
It's all right. Yeah, I'm not going to say no. But a lot of that stuff I just ended up running from because I'm like, there is no why. This is shallow. It's not, it's bogus. And if I build my whole thing on this as easily as the wind has blown my way, it can blow the other way. But if I'm delivering stuff that makes people feel stuff because I know the mechanics of how to do it, and I can do that for hire, all of a sudden I have a real business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know our time is about run out, but I didn't want to miss the music portion of what I hoped to talk to you about.
Yeah, let's do it.
On my podcast, music is a huge part of like who I am. I'm named after the song by The Looking Glass, Brandy, You're a Fine Girl, all that stuff.
Really?
That's what, my middle name is C, so that's where that comes from. My mom's a drummer, and my parents are super cool. But so music was like always in my house, and I have an ear for it, and it's very I find really deep meaning in different songs. And so I talk about this on the podcast all the time. And it's a huge part of my process. So at various stages of my process, like whether it's the word map and I don't listen to lyrics, I listen to a lot of Sleeping At Last or things like without lyrics. And then as the process goes on, I listen to completely different styles of music as it like progresses. I wanted to know, like, I know that music is a big thing for you. You did your coloring book. That was like the big kickoff for your journey, I guess, part of your journey. But what sorts of music do you listen to when you really want to get into the zone? And then what are you listening to right now that you just really love that I should be listening to?
Yeah, I love these questions because I'm, music is so important to me. But so if I'm ever if I'm really thinking, I don't have any music. If I'm thinking, like actively trying to find what I want to say in a particular episode or with a piece of work, whatever it is, I'm usually, but that's.
So you write in silence?
Yeah, I write in silence.
Ooh.
Writing is a silent thing.
I didn't expect
for the
that.
most part. But then as soon as I have the kernel of it, then I'm instantly into instrumental stuff. One of my favorites, and has been one of my favorites for a while now, is Tourist. Do you know this band?
I
think
don't.
It's just one guy.
Writing it down.
Definitely. I think his second to latest album is called Awake. And that, at least one of the songs is called that. But that album is more or less how I want my life to feel all the time. It's like, it's got a fast beat, but it seems super chill. And it's just very ethereal, and it's very morning vibe. And that's where
we
I'm at.
We were
the
meant
light.
to be friends, Andy.
Yes.
That's all I have to say right now.
You go listen to this and you tell me if this hits you, because
I will.
That's my jam. I haven't even played it out yet. I've listened to it a billion times. But there's a lot of stuff in that vein that I listen to if I'm doing any idea-based stuff. So if I'm doing outlines or writing or concepting or anything like that, then I'll do that. And then, you know, if I'm working on, if I'm like coloring an illustration, then I'm going to listen to, you know, lyric heavy stuff.
Yeah.
The people that come to mind the most, my favorite album this year, and it's my favorite album in I don't even know how long, is Saint Cloud by Waxahachie. Have you listened to that?
I have listened to that. Yes, I do love that
I'm
one.
so obsessed with it. And I, she said she might be on my podcast, which I'm very excited about. But I don't know if I can lock it down or not, but whatever.
You're speaking it into existence.
I'm trying.
Right,
come on, Katie. One of my first questions is going to be, did you design the opening sound to be the perfect way to start the album, but also to follow up the last song? Because you listen to it and you're like, I just want to listen to it again and again and again. It's so good. I'm obsessed with that. And then the other band that has really been doing it for me for a while, musician, is Alex G. He used to go by Sandy Alex G. He was Alex G. Then he was Sandy Alex G. Now he's Alex G again. And he's kind of like, he gets described a lot as like Elliott Smith meets Built to Spill. It's like very singer-songwriter with the kind of 90s alternative indie stuff. And he's real experimental on certain tracks. So certain tracks are really singer-songwriter with some experimental kind of production. But yeah, he's probably the most interesting musician making music to me. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I heard your interview with Jamie Drake, and
I love Jamie.
I actually featured one of her songs on a podcast episode that I talked about not too long ago. So I was like, oh, this is so great. I actually, like you said, you couldn't find much on her on the internet. I couldn't either. So I was like, this is perfect. This is great.
She is fantastic. She is so talented and the sweetest person of all time.
Yeah. So I have a whole playlist, music from Design Speaks podcast on Spotify that is like 2 whole days of music now, I think.
What? That's amazing. I have a little playlist called CPT Work List.
Oh, I don't think I know about this. CPT Work List?
Yeah, it's almost all instrumental. There is some vocals, but they're like vocals mostly used as like an instrument kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we're probably hitting the edge of me being polite with your time. So speaking of being polite, we will have to do this again in the future.
Absolutely.
I hope.
Yeah.
And if there is anything else you would like to say to the audience, now is your chance.
Okay, no pressure. The one thing. I would say, I mean, your audience is mostly creative types,
yes.
It seems.
Yes, creative professionals, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and it's in a new class I'm working on with Skillshare. It's going to be coming out soon, and it's this idea that have you ever heard me tell the alien story?
Yes, but feel free. Proceed.
Right, this is it. This is the thing. This self-discovery thing that we had a thread throughout this. I kept coming back in my mind. I kept thinking about how important self-discovery is to me. And a lot of what we talked about falls in that bucket, you know, your sensibility and knowing yourself and asking why and all that stuff. And I think that my favorite little story about this that I think illustrates why I'm so obsessed with it is this idea that what if one day you're minding your own business and out of the sky, maybe a wormhole pops open and an alien just falls out of the sky, and the alien has this alien device and it looks otherworldly and crazy. And the alien tells you, I've got 3 things to tell you about this device. The first one is, this is the only one of these in the universe. The second one is, of course, yeah, it's always that way. The second one is, inside this thing is the known universe's most complex inner machinery. That it defies logic. We don't even know how it works. It's so complex. And then the third thing I'm going to tell you is, what this thing can do, what it was made for, what it's capable of. And then right before he tells you number 3, another alien pops out of the wormhole, but this one's clearly a bad alien and kills the first alien before they can tell you what it's for. And if anybody was in that circumstance, right? If an alien gave you a device, it was the only one in the universe, and it was the most complex inner machinery, you would do whatever you could do to figure out the answer to number 3. Yeah. What can this thing do?
Right.
And of course, your audience has saw the punchline.
Yes.
You're in that circumstance right now. There's no other thing like you in all the universe. Right. In your head, you have the known universe's most complex inner machinery.
Yes.
We literally don't know how it works. And yet, are you doing what it takes? Are you doing everything that you can to figure out what does this weird combination do?
Yeah.
Because it's never existed and it'll never exist again. And if all you've done is a personality test and sat with your guidance counselor in high school and said, what's this thing for? You're not doing the work.
Yeah,
you're not doing what you're
enough.
Here on the planet to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know why I just pictured the device as the little thing that the cat wears around his neck on Men in Black. The universe.
Yeah, I love that. I wonder if it's because I've talked about that. It's similar to it's a similar like story device with Wizard of Oz where the thing they're looking for, they have the whole time.
Yes.
And that's also true for you. The thing you're looking for, you have. You're not looking for something you don't have. You're looking for what you already have.
Just got to do a little digging.
Got to dig it. Yeah. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andy, for being a part of Design Speaks podcast. I have been dying to talk to you, and it did not disappoint. And I loved all our tangents, and it's got to happen more. So,
well, before anybody gives me hate mail, ADHD is real, and go look at the symptoms. One of the top ones is interrupting people, and I tried not to, but I was too excited.
But Brandy
you should have
doesn't
asked
care.
worse questions. If you would have asked boring questions, I would have been able to contain myself.
I don't know how to do boring, so
okay,
I think that's a good start. So, where can people find you? And all that good stuff. Here's your shameless plug moment.
Shameless plug. Instagram at Andy J Pizza, and wherever podcasts are, you can search Creative Pep Talk, and we'll be there.
Okay. And your Skillshare class?
Yeah, search me on Skillshare. We have the first class is about orchestrating a breakthrough in your creative career with a strategic project, and that one's really about marketing your work. The next class we haven't announced yet, but it's gonna be good. It's coming out in the next month.
Well, you used my favorite S word strategy, so we're officially friends. All
right,
have you
Andy. Done the? I interrupted on the last moment.
I'm ready. When you're good.
Have you taken StrengthsFinder?
You know what? I haven't.
You should take that one if you like. Stuff like Enneagram. This one is, and I would just prepare you. This was like 6 years ago when I took this, and my top strength is strategy, and that I'd never considered myself to be a strategic person before that. And when I read it, what's so interesting about that test is other personality tests, you read it and you're like, oh yeah, that's me.
Right.
But almost everything on that list were things I really didn't know about myself. They were words that and then by diving in, I was like, oh my gosh, like another one was competitive. And I realized I hate sports, not because I don't like them, but because I suck at them and I can't stand to lose. That's why I hate sports. I highly recommend it. It costs like $12 or something, but it's really good.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, when I first took the Enneagram, probably like 5 or so years ago, I came out as a 3. Yeah. And I was like, no, I'm a designer. I have to be a 4.
Yeah.
Right? I have to be a 4. So I sort of shunned it for a while until about 2 or 3 years ago, and have obviously been through some journey of my own since then, and was like, okay, yeah, I'm definitely, there is no doubt here. I am like all the numbers on 3. And so wing 4 and all that makes for why I wear blue wigs and things like that. So, all right. That's awesome. Okay. This is officially goodbye then.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was super fun.
Thanks for being here. And we'll be in touch until next time. Bye-bye. So Julie, that was a lot to take, I think, probably. Were you able to follow it? What did you think? What were your takeaways? Tell me all the things.
Okay, well, my number one takeaway was I loved that he talked about Breath of the Wild.
All you Breath of the Wild fans out there.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. And I also like grew up watching Muppet stuff, so that was fun too. But,
yeah, did you notice his little Muppet in the background of the video? Oh, wait. I don't think you've seen the video yet.
I haven't. So no, I did not, but I imagined it.
Yeah, he has a little Muppet up on his shelf that's like him. And
that's awesome.
Incredible.
Yeah, I remember you guys talking about it.
Yeah. So thankfully for you visual learners, we now have this podcast on YouTube. So all of our episodes, most of our episodes will be there, so you can check out Andy and see our crazy and live and living color. I think that it's really valuable for designers and for creatives to see someone like Andy, who is so free and so confident in his voice, but also see that he does have like some guidelines and some processes to it. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, it was really interesting to hear like his like story process and everything.
Yeah. What was it that surprised you most about the conversation, do you think, besides hearing that he's a Breath of the Wild fan? Because it's the best thing ever made, is what he said.
I would definitely put it in my like top 10 video games ever, maybe even top 5 ever.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Mine is still Tetris. Sorry.
Yeah, is it because of the colors?
It's because I've decided, I've actually, here we go again, another sidebar. I've actually been thinking a bit about like what it is that I love about Tetris. And I think that I'm so good at it because it's like putting together puzzles in different ways. Yeah. And it's not like an actual puzzle where like there is only one way to fix this puzzle. And, Tetris is like problem solving on steroids, and it's like instantaneous, and it's like math and colors and problem solving, which is basically what I do for a living.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
So
I was like, really? Tetris is her favorite? And now I'm like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it all makes sense. The thread was there since I played on my little Game Boy in like 6th grade. So, yeah. So what was like the most surprising thing for you about the conversation?
Surprising? I don't know. I really liked when it's hard to choose because the conversation was
everywhere. Yeah. It was like a word map. It was like there are threads here, but it's a little bit all over the place.
I thought it was super interesting though when he was talking about story and how it's like programmed into us, like how it wasn't like someone was like, oh, hey, this works well, and then everybody started doing it. Like, it's literally just, like, part of human nature. It's how we do things without even thinking about it. I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, how we talk about life. Like, was he talking something about, like, I got a flat tire or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, people just inherently know. Now, granted, there are people like my mother, who I love very dearly and who I often take after in many ways, but sometimes I'm just like, what's the actual story? What do you like? You were going to the store and then you did this and then you did that and then this and this and this. Okay, so what's the point here?
Right.
So we are inherently storytellers, but I think the beauty of telling stories for a living as creatives is that we have to learn how to edit ourselves down and learn how to tell those stories in the best way that reflects our voice.
Yeah, like it comes natural, but also you kind of have to craft it. If you're going to be intentional about it, it has to be like well crafted.
Yeah, for sure.
But at least people will naturally respond well to it. They don't have to think about it. It just happens.
Yes. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this interview. It was an absolute blast to record. There was a couple technical issues in the beginning, so hopefully the beginning part isn't too funky for you to watch slash listen to. But you can find Andy everywhere at Andy J Pizza. His name is actually Andy Miller, but he goes by Andy J Pizza on literally everything. And he has so many cool resources. He has a a side project that he does called Co-Loop, which is a group of other illustrators, and it's kind of a collective of people that can support each other. And so I really appreciate what he does. You should go support him. Go check out all the things that he has. He has a really cool workbook for helping you find your creative voice. And yeah, I hope that this was helpful and encouraging and entertaining. I don't usually say that, but I'm pretty sure this
I
one
would
was
say it was entertaining. Yeah.
So I think that's it. And I hope you guys have an awesome week. Until next time. All right, everybody. That's our episode for today. If you enjoy this podcast and want to support us, you can become one of our exclusive patrons over at patreon.com/designspeaks. You'll have access to extended episodes and lots of fun bonus content and even more coming very soon. Design Speaks is produced by Kenneth Niffen and Dakota Cook. Audio production by the Podcast Babes. Thanks to Colin from Vespertine for our incredible theme music. You can find Vespertine on Apple Music and Spotify. Design Speaks is a project of Brandy C. Designs. It's recorded and produced in the shadow of the Watermelon Pink Sandia Mountains near Albuquerque, New Mexico. You can leave us a note on Instagram at Design Speaks Podcast, and you can find all current and past episodes at designspeakspodcast.com. Thanks again for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time.